Uh, so it gives me a great privilege to introduce one of the best wildlifers that I've ever met in Hashim. I mean, he was one of the inspirations for me to join wildlife in terms of just working in wildlife as well. Especially once I'd read, he wrote a small booklet on Bandhavgarh when I was in school. He was also responsible for me seeing my first tiger when I went to Bandhavgarh because he had seen it and he pointed us in the correct direction. And we got lucky after. And he was the first person I worked with in hospitality in the wilderness, where we had set up Bhagwan Lodge in Pench when Pench was literally unknown to tourism. It was his vision. He has all these visions consistently of operating and opening up lodges in greenfield areas. And that is something that has always been close to me as well. That is something I always have enjoyed doing. And more than that, his knowledge, his work ethic, his understanding of quality hospitality in the wilderness, and to give the best experience possible where it's not outpriced for everybody, where everybody can get to it and you can actually, and basically you initiate more people into understanding wildlife, and especially in India. So, I mean, from all the years that he's worked in Nepal and then set up Bhagwan, then set up Forsyth in Satpura, now partner in Snow Leopard Lodge as well as in Run Riders. Hashim, I look forward to you enthralling us with the fireside chat because you're one of the best that I have seen at it. So over to you.
Oh my God. I'm glad you stuck to the script. You know, I'll buy you that whiskey. Yeah.
No, otherwise I get beaten up. No? So
yeah. Samir, thanks a lot. Yeah. And, you know, hi, everyone. So I just thought, you know, I use this term, the Beyond the Last Hotel, because that's a strapline for our, you know, the Kafila luxury camps, which is a small camp that, you know, after we sold Forsyths in Bhagwan and so on, we set up this place to access areas in central India, particularly, which nobody goes to, and which are, you know, quite fantastic, like Kuno and Kalinjar, et cetera, et cetera. But also because, you know, I mean, I started in wildlife tourism quite by accident in 1978. And so in a sense, and that was in Nepal, there was no significant wildlife tourism as an industry in India. You know, a few mom and pop hotels, but that was it. And so, in a sense, the trajectory of my career has pretty much been hitched to the trajectory of the development of wildlife tourism as an industry in India. I mean, when I first went in 1978, I remember my mother to Nepal. My mother was absolutely horrified that, you know, Doon School, bloody Loyola College, you know, this, that, and the other. And I'm going off, and she said, "What are you going to do over there?" I said, "I'm going to be a guide." She said, "What? You going to? Yeah, are you serious?" And I said, "Yeah, you know, I mean, just for a year or two or whatever it is." But, you know, from there, it's grown to become quite a respectable old thing. And you can actually make a few bob on it, make a career, have good fun. And it also allows you to do all of this without actually ever quite growing up. You know, I mean, you can just have fun and, you know, not have anything. So basically, even when I worked at Tiger Tops and even when I worked for myself, all the places we went to were, you might almost say, greenfield areas. So wherever we went was beyond the last hotel. So I thought it might be appropriate to do this. Whenever I start with anything these days to do with anything to do with conservation, I don't know, is there some disturbance from my end or from somewhere else?
Some mics would be off, Hashim.
Yeah, request everyone just switch their mics off. I think someone probably's mic is on. Thank you. I think, yeah. I'll mute them.
Okay, don't worry.
I'll mute them.
Yeah, it's just one thing that I like to do, just to focus minds, is to look at population data. You know, just over 300 years ago, the global population is estimated to be 600 million. India at the same time was about 170 million, 160 million. You know, this was the old Mughal Empire, all the way from Kabul, all the way down south to the Carnatic. When I was born, the population of the country was 433 million and change. When I went to work in 1978, it was 667 million.
You already put your makeup on.
Sorry, somebody asked something?
No, sir, I think it's background noise.
Okay. And so, I mean, 42 years ago, 667 million. Just as COVID struck, 1.3, almost 1.4, I think it's now supposed to have gone beyond 1.4 million people. So just in my lifetime, the population has 1 billion people have been added just to the population of the country, which goes back to what Samir and I were talking about, and some of us were just chatting about as to what's happening in Gujarat, which is kind of a microcosm of what's happened everywhere else. Anyway, I was fortunate enough that, when I first got the job, I first actually worked with Alok Chandola as my boss. I was sent to work in possibly the earliest of the Trans-Himalaya treks, which was great fun. But then in December 1978, went off to Nepal to work at Dsobs in Royal Chitwan National Park. And that was my home for the next 5 years. Nepal was a different place. Like, the whole subcontinent was a different place. You can imagine what Kathmandu was like. No traffic police, no traffic lights. It was just gorgeous. You woke up every morning and this was the view. We were in Chitwan, we were at 450 feet above sea level. This was the little village of Megholi where the airstrip was. I mean, this was the second flight that I had ever taken in my life. This was on a twin otter, and I landed on this airstrip, and this was the view. I just couldn't believe it. I thought literally I'd died and gone to heaven subtropical, lush subtropical forest, full of rhinoceros, full of tigers, and this was the backdrop. Himachuli, Manaslu, Peak 29. At the other end was Fishtail peeking out over the Mahabharat range. If you went up into the Shivaliks, you could see Annapurna absolutely clearly. So yeah, I mean, literally, there's the Naraini River. You can see at the bottom of the picture is a full-grown male gharial with Himachuli in the backdrop. And there was none of the pollution that you have today. And this was every morning. You woke up, the mist lifted by about 9 or 10, and this was the view. And it was stunning every day you saw it, but you took it for granted. You never thought it would change. We never, ever could have thought that pollution of this level could ever take over and obscure the views that, basically we'd grown up with. So it was for me, it was an absolutely golden period. Unlike a lot of the others who had gone, and like myself, when I first went there, the idea was just to spend a year or two doing this and then come back and, get on to proper life, adult life, grown-up stuff. Well, I never got beyond that. I just fell in love with the wilderness, fell in love with living in the wild. And except for a short 1-year interregnum in 1984, have made it my career and a lifestyle, really. It was just so, Nepal, especially in those days, was just so sort of remote, so exotic. And one of the things that happened at that time was that, it was a lot of fun. I mean, this gentleman out here may actually be on this talk. This is Ashish Chandola, who, when I arrived in Nepal, turned out to be my chief naturalist. And who was a very interesting chap to work for. Got me into a heck of a lot of trouble.
I'm hearing that.
You're hearing that. And there was Alok Chandola as well. And there's, Manvijay Singh Gumrao, great friends. We did all kinds of crazy things in those days. This is the World Elephant Polo Association. 3 of us are playing for Pan Am, and we came runners up, and Pan Am gave us a free round the world ticket, first class round the world ticket on Pan Am. You met the great and the glorious. You met, rich, famous people. This was the place to go to in the subcontinent. It was the official destination for all of Nepal's, government guests. And this is Princess Anne. And I was assigned to take her for a walk and she only had an afternoon. And I'd gone and sort of, recce'd this fantastic unknown rhino wallow in the middle of the jungle, no track leading to it. So you had to actually find that particular rhino track to get to it. And I was so nervous that I forgot the track. I took the wrong track. And anyway, we bashed around the jungle, saw absolutely nothing. And as we were coming back, you saw some cheetal or something. And as we were coming just outside, to my horror, I found that there was a tick on her arm. And I said to her, I said, ma'am, you've got a tick on your arm. If you just give it to me, I'll take it off. Oh, she said, oh, don't worry. She said, look, she said, that's a completely new species for me. So, yeah, she was great fun. And I mean, there are a whole lot of stories from all of these people, Goldie Hawn and Robert Redford and so on. And, you know, what a place to work and what a place to live. We were right in the heart of the jungle. There was rhinos wandering around out there. You could, you know, I mean, more than once tigers were seen actually within the rooms, within the staff quarters, bears, all of that. I mean, it was absolute magic. And we also met the two people who, in many ways, sort of set the course of my life and actually made us aware that tourism could also was a conservation tool. They're both on this elephant. The guy pointing is Dr. Charles McDougall, Chuck McDougall. Many of you may have read his book, Face of the Tiger. And that was his partner, Jim Edwards, who was chairman of the company. And both of them made us aware of the fact that yeah, it was a business, but if handled properly, it was a conservation tool as well. And so they made us aware of the fact that, you know, conservation is a troika. You have good science. So all decisions should be based and measured by good science. And Chuck himself had the longest running study on wild tigers going on. He was an associate researcher for the Smithsonian as well. And all the great studies on rhinos, etc., were done in Chitwan. So we had access to all of that. And Tiger Tops was very much a partner in many of these studies, you know, helping with logistics, helping with all kinds of resources that the government didn't have. And Jim Edwards absolutely, totally believed in this. I mean, he was quite a colorful character, had all kinds of, yeah, you know, I mean, people have, he was a bit of a Marmite character, but he was absolutely committed to conservation tourism. And that's something that has, you know, been the foundation of everything that I've done and thought about and worked on ever since then. I then went off in 1985. I was re-employed by Tiger Tops as director operations for India. Tiger Tops was expanding into India. Some of you may or may not know that many of the initiatives that, you know, have become very famous, like all the wildlife tourism development in South India, led by Jungle Lodges and Resorts, Carbony River Lodge. This is all a Tiger Tops project. But one of the things that they had gone into association with a guy called KK Singh in Bandhavgarh. And Bandhavgarh, you can imagine what it was like in the early mid 80s. You know, I mean, it was tiny, 105 square kilometers, but all the forest that is now part of the Greater Tiger Reserve was all there, was existent, but there were no tourists. You know, and there was just one other facility, KK Singh's place, which Tiger Tops had adopted, and that's how I went there. And there was a tiny place, a government White Tiger Lodge with just 8 cottages. And that was it, you know, absolute heaven. And I got permission over there. I started spending more and more time in Bandhavgarh and got permission to explore this landscape on foot. Did a survey on the birds of Bandhavgarh, the first sort of long-term survey of the avifauna of the eastern Vindhyas of the Vindhyachal region, which was eventually published as a paper in the Journal of the PNHS. But what it did was I had permission to walk everywhere and camp anywhere I wanted. So it allowed me complete access to this, you know, incredible landscape, which is not just wild, but was also one of the most important historical and cultural sites. Bandhavgarh is one of the most important and famous of the forts of central India. And this temple, although it is the structure is presently is a Baghel structure, but it goes back probably almost 2,000 years. You know, it's one of the oldest Ram Lakshman temples and one of the oldest Lakshman temples anywhere in India. And this tank was a fantastic place to see tigers in the summer, because there was just one pujari there, and you went quietly and slept on the corridor in the corridor of the temple, and, you know, very good chance that you'd see tigers. And this is what the landscape all around the fort was, you know, fantastic old ruins. You wandered all over this place on foot. You stumbled on temples. In fact, I don't know if you guys know an ex-DOSCO, Kishore Lahiri, my batch. His wife is doing a long-term actually study on all these remains and pre-culture cave temples and not temples, but Buddhist era caves in this whole region. Very interesting study over there. So that was what Bandhavgarh was like. And what it allowed me to do, the survey that I was doing, was allowed me to wander into the greater Bandhavgarh landscape. And while I was doing that, I discovered a village called Pator, which is 8 kilometers north of Tala, which is, as some of you may know, is the entrance to the park, the main entrance to the park, and fell in love with this village. And in 1992, I had acquired some land and built a house there, which is this one. And all that forest behind is the Panpatha Wildlife Sanctuary, which is part of the core area of Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve. And this is the view from the house. This view goes back to 1992. And I've just got this here to show you a comparison of what's happened to the village in these years. It's one of the few places that's probably improved, because you see how much trees have come in and obscured most of the village out there. The only thing, like everywhere else in rural India, is cheap Chinese loudspeakers have found their way here. So every now and again, we all have a party. My kids they weren't born here, but they came here very shortly after being born. So this is home. And after I had to go off to England for a while, but I'm back now, living here full time in this area. And fantastic thing is obviously that we are right at the edge of the forest. So this is a female leopard who has been mating. I mean, she and the male had been mating the whole night. You can still hear the alarm calls. And this is from the house. So I took this from the house. This is in January 2020. So we share our landscape with all kinds. Tigers are very regular. This is the camera trap I have behind the house. Tigers, very, very common. If you're lucky, you can actually, if you hear alarm calls and you get to the edge of the property on time, you'll actually see the tiger yourself. That's happened a few times. Leopards all the time in the area, bears, porcupines, of course, and very excitingly, every now and again, we get rattle, which I think are just fantastic to see. And then, of course, kind of interestingly, we've had the advent of elephants. After almost 250 years, Bandhavgarh has not seen elephants. And these elephants have come in from Jharkhand due to all the disturbance that's taken place over there. And it was very interesting how they found their way back. It took them about 2 or 3 years. They used to send scouting parties, small scouting parties that would spend first a month, then 2 months, then 3 months, then larger groups came, then they'd come only for the winter. And finally, there's about 70 of them sharing this landscape. It's fantastic to see them. This is very, very close to my house, literally an easy walk, about 3 kilometers away. And we see them on a couple of occasions. They've broken into the property as well. But it is one more factor to add to the human-wildlife conflict area. Human-elephant conflict is one of the biggest problems that we face all over the place, and which brings us to the cost of conservation. I think we all know that all of us love conservation, all of us are involved in it, all of us want to protect everything, but the price of that is paid by the local people. And I think one of the biggest failures of our conservation strategy is that we don't actually give adequate value to that price that people are paying. And we only look at it in sort of very materialistic terms. Okay, it's not crop loss, but we don't even compensate them for the amount of crop loss. And I've estimated over the years that depending on where your field is located, you could lose anything, up to 18 to 20% of your crop in a year. 18 to 20% is your entire profit is wiped out. But it's not just that, it's a distortion of your lifestyle. People have to spend every day on these mairas, they call them, these little machans are called mairas in our area, every day, protecting their crops at night, all night. And people nowadays with the elephants in, there are, people have been killed guarding their fields from elephants. So it's a huge price that people are paying. They're not adequately compensated. And to my mind, that's been a huge distortion in the system. These elephants, again, have come in. This was about a 30, 40 acre patch of paddy, which is owned by about 8, 10 people. This was in the summer of 2020. This entire belt of paddy has been abandoned because it just wasn't worth anybody's effort to cultivate over here. While living over there, one of the interesting things was that when I moved from a tourist lodge, a tourist camp in Tala, 8 kilometers to live in a village, it was like moving into another universe. I had 12 acres of farmland as well. So I was doing a little bit of farming, or trying to anyway. And you suddenly realize that many of the sort of, the assumptions that we make, the facile assumptions that people are too stupid, that if they did things better, if they did stall feeding of cattle, for instance, if they abandoned free range grazing, if they had smokeless chulas, if they if they took biogas, then their lives would be so much better. The stupid villagers, they don't do it. When you actually live there, you realize there's very, very good sound logic behind all their economic decisions. And a simple fact is that when you actually do the numbers, stall feeding is far more expensive in every possible way to free range grazing. And when you do the profit and loss, you actually make a greater net profit through free range grazing than you do through stall feeding. Just as an example, you look at, the government really tried, and we did, because I was part of the joint forest management sort of infrastructure in the area. I was, head of the Van Suraksha Samitis, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that we were all trying to do is forcibly push smokeless chulas, for instance. We were trying to push, saying, so much effort in bringing firewood, so much pressure on the forest, etc. Biogas karte hain, ye sab karte hain. All kinds of great designs were distributed. And then you realize that very shortly everything was being abandoned, because smokeless chulas take 15 to 20 minutes to heat up, enough to cook food with. And during the day, people eat kalewa, yesterday's food. So they come in, they don't want to spend 20 minutes before they can start heating anything. They want 20 minutes to warm the food, eat it, and go back into their fields. So, the smokeless chulas, which are very well built by locally trained women, were abandoned. They can't sit around in the winter. They can't sit around a smokeless chula having a nice, fireside chat and keeping warm, which they can do in the open chulas. And biogas, no individual house was making enough dung, as it were. There's simply individual holdings of cattle are simply not enough. So, it made you realize that, this whole problem of what we think is obvious market-driven solutions simply don't work, because there's a different logic at work in subsistence farming. So anyway, so that was kind of a very enlightening and a life-changing sort of period for me, understanding what actually constitutes what we need to do for conservation. And one of the things, of course, is conservation tourism. We talked about that fact, earlier, what is conservation tourism? And very briefly, I'd say, what's the difference when people sort of say, well, what do you think is the difference between just regular wildlife tourism and conservation tourism? Very subjectively, in my own mind, I would say that conservation tourism is tourism in which you make conscious decisions to have conservation-friendly outcomes, as opposed to just regular wildlife tourism, where you happen to have a large hotel, resort, whatever, in a wildlife area. Because you happen to be over there, your guests pay the entry fee, the park earns revenue, you employ a few people, some of whom may be local, some of whom may not. You try, so whatever you're doing, your decisions are commercial decisions with incidental benefits to local community and incidentally to conservation. Conservation tourism is where all your decisions are somehow or the other linked to a conservation outcome. So how do we measure up? Well, in some ways, okay, in some ways not so okay, as with most things in India. But funnily enough, I actually think that we do better than most. Given the population numbers, for instance, that I showed earlier, we have done an incredible job in the amount of forest that we still manage to save. I mean, you go to Southeast Asia, it's an absolute disaster zone. So we've done better with that. What surprises me, though, is why there is still such a violent debate, both within government and outside of government, about the value and benefits of wildlife tourism. It's so obvious, And I did a show for the government. I did a presentation for the government a couple of years ago, and so I just thought I'd show some. You guys might be interested in looking at some numbers. This is all Madhya Pradesh centric because that's where I live. But I looked at the big five, in Madhya Pradesh: Panna, Pench, Bandhavgarh, Kanha, and Satpura, which are the only properly well-developed tourism destinations, wildlife tourism destinations in MP, which has a plethora of great reserves and protected areas. So actually, the wildlife tourism in MP could be 10 times bigger, but this is all it is. And the last greenfield park that was developed, as Samir was saying, was Satpura. In fact, Samir was very much my guide when we went there in 2007, started looking out for all of these places. After Satpura, there has been no further development because all development of these parks has been driven by private entrepreneurs. The Wrights in Kanha, Shamen Singh in Panna, KK Singh in Bandhavgarh, and ourselves, Wild India Camps in Panna, in Pench, and Satpura. Government has done nothing for this. But look at the revenues that are earned just through entry fees. Okay, so I've reduced the entry fees in the big five, to a proportionate sort of, some kind of like-to-like proportionate measure. So I've said, how much do these big five earn per square kilometer? Look at that, almost 33,000 rupees per square kilometer per year. This was 2018, 2019. Tourism of all other PAs and MP, remember, this is one of the richest areas for forest, 6,100 square kilometers. Look at the difference there. But worse still, take out Van Vihar from Bhopal, which is basically a city zoo, but take that out and, it drops to 1/10 of what these developed parks are, 3,200. So you can say that, okay, it's not like for like, there's a whole mixed bag of protected areas you're mixing into this. So then quite subjectively, I've chosen 4 other parks, Sanjay Tiger Reserve, Kuno National Park, Ratapani. Kuno is where the lions were supposed to have gone in and also the cheetahs are supposed to come in. Okay, Ratapani just outside Bhopal, Nora Dehi, which is, both Ratapani and Nora Dehi have been proposed as tiger reserves. Look at that. Big five, 32,000, 33,000. With these other 4, which you would expect great tourism, is down to 1,260 rupees revenue per square kilometer. All right. What kind of, what outcomes does this have in terms of money invested? So I've looked at Kuno. Kuno is, is an important park for conservation for our future. It's been specially selected. Look at the difference. Revenue total for Bandhavgarh, 8.52 crores. Kuno, 2.86 lakhs. And in 2018, 2019, over 2 lakhs of this was revenue that came from our company, Kafila Camps, because we had 2 big camps there. We had 2 groups that went over there. Revenue per square kilometer, look at how ridiculous it becomes. 55,000 for Bandhavgarh, 383 for Kuno. Expenditure, 9.5 crores, 3 crores. More importantly, expenditure in Bandhavgarh per square kilometer, almost 62,000. In Kuno, 40,000. Bearing in mind that Kuno has the most minute and intensive habitat management program of any park possibly in India, because a lot of the grasslands that they have maintained are actually cultivated grasslands. So you can imagine the expense. In the summer, bowsers are taken out there to water some of these areas and to put water for the wildlife in that area. But look at the difference in that. And that 30% difference per square kilometer of investment, of expenditure in Kuno, I mean, to my mind, it's clearly down to the fact that Kuno earns nothing. So the government simply doesn't have the revenue to invest in Kuno. What does that mean for Kuno? So, now look at another number that Raghu Chandawat did. I don't know if you guys can just read it for yourself. 8 times the total tourism earnings they estimated was 8 times the gate revenue. Okay, 45% of which is plowed back into the area. I mean, just look at that. In Bandhavgarh, it is almost 2 lakh rupees per square kilometer was being put back into the local area. And when you go to Bandhavgarh, you will see the effects. Bandhavgarh, Kanha, Pench, anywhere. You see the effects of that. Everybody has a motorcycle. Everybody has vehicles. You see the standard of living. You see the schools that they're sending their children to. You look at the food they're eating. You look at the white goods they are buying. On the other hand, Kuno, 1,378 rupees per square kilometer. This was one of the best years that they had. Go down to that. Look at the number of tigers on the same year. Bandhavgarh 104, Kuno 0. And look at the map. Look at where Kuno is. That's the red dot. And look west of that is Sawai Madhopur, which is connected to Kuno with a very viable corridor. And Kuno was, we all know just how Ranthambore is just pumping out surplus tigers. And tigers and all wildlife find their way to suitable habitat very, very quickly and very, very easily. No tigers are surviving between this area of Sawai Madhopur and Kuno. They're all being killed. No tiger gets to. I mean, if there was protection out here, if there was money coming from Kuno into the local communities, if you had money being spent in this area, Kuno would have been overrun with tigers, and there would have been tigers down into what's that other place? Shivpuri as well. Nothing, all gone. Now, we don't have to read through all of this, but you can see why there's a problem. There are Pardis and Mogias over here, which is the big community of hunters, completely poverty-stricken. Nothing, no program out there happening to put money into the local area. Dire poverty everywhere. No benefits from the park at all. No compensation for livestock loss. Very little. Very, very little compensation paid. Very difficult. And I'll tell you something, you go into the park, well, I don't know about right now, but when we were going to the park before COVID, every day, beautiful park, lots of wildlife, but every day inside the park in daylight, you were hearing gunshots over there. This is Kuno, you know, in the late summer, you can see how absolutely gorgeous it is. Not actually late summer, it's winter. That's the Kuno River, full of wildlife, great herds of cheetah because they've actually been cultivated. You know, the grasslands have been cultivated out there. Stunning area. And when they moved, and the one park where every single village has been moved out to adhere to the Gujarat government's requirement, you know, before moving the lions. And one of the things they did was they left all the cattle there so that the lions would have easy prey when they came in. Of course, these cattle, you know, I mean, this, you know, you go and you can see that wonderful Pardi gentleman taking us for a walk. A great looking character, but I don't think he knew very much. We didn't see a damn thing. But anyway, so I just thought that I would then also just look at our experience in Forsyths in Satpura when we started Satpura. So as Samir said, one of the part of the charter of our company, Wild India Camps, which I was a partner, was that we would not crowd into established parks and we would not crowd into areas that were already developed. We had opened a page with Bhagwan back in 2001, 2002. And at that time, we had spoken to government to say that, listen, you know, I mean, we have a chance, greenfield site here. We have a chance to actually preempt all the mistakes made in Kanha and Bandhavgarh. Even at that time, it was overcrowded. Even at that time, corridors were being split. Even at that time, there was a completely chaotic development of lodges and camps and everything like that. So we said, you know, we can zone over here. We can do it properly. We can have an area for, because it's only 80 kilometers Painch. This is Satpura, but Painch, the entrance is only 85, 90 kilometers from Nagpur. Even in those days, it was an easy drive. So we said, you know, we can do it for day trippers. We can do separately. We had given them a whole plan. Government ignored us completely. They said, kuch nahi hoga, you guys, ye to saalo lag jayenge before it developed. Within 2 years. And the interesting thing that I want to tell you guys is, one of the reasons we chose Painch was because in the mid-90s, Ullas Karanth had done a study in Kanha and Painch. And what he discovered was that in Painch, the prey base was fantastic. And the tiger numbers were actually much lower than the carrying capacity, which argued that tigers were being selectively poached in the area. So that was also one of the factors that influenced our decision to go over there, because even at that time, we were quite convinced that tourism, with the money it brings in, but as importantly, with the number of eyes it brings in, with the amount of sort of activity it engenders, with the fact that, you know, when tourists are there, the forest department, the management, everybody has to get more active because there are no more eyes, more cameras, more people talking. This was before social media, but even then. And so that always had, and we'd seen this in Bandhavgarh. We hadn't sort of quantitatively recorded it, but we had seen it, you know, as something that was happening in front of us. And so we went in over there, and one of India's biggest wildlife tourism companies, the owner came and said,
come on this, which is very good.
Somebody's got their mic on. And if it's a question, just ask me, guys. So one of the interesting things was that this guy came and said to me, and Samir will remember his name, guy called Ravi Kalra, and he said, oh, you know, very brave decision, fantastic what you're doing here. Yeah, fantastic, hai? Lekin chalega nahi. So maine kaha, thanks for encouragement. Kyun nahi chalega? So he said, nahi, sheri nahi dikhta hai. Yeah, kya chalega? And within 2 years, the tiger numbers were back up because tigers just breed like crazy. Tigers were breeding. It was just that they were being hammered. As soon as you reduce the poaching, tiger numbers came right back. So anyway, Painch was great fun, and you know, but you know, it got crowded very quickly. And then we've been talking about Satpura. Samir had told me about Satpura as well. He'd worked a little bit over there on a leopard project, and you know, so we went over there and just fell in love with the place. So this is the dam, the backwaters of the dam of the Tawa River, and this is a photograph taken from 2007. And you can see, if you've been to Satpura, you'll see all of this river bank is now unfortunately, you know, covered with housing or lodges and resorts and hotels and so on. You know, very, very untidy development of the riverfront, which is very, very sad. But one of the things that we did do over there, we went over there and we were very, very lucky that the chief wildlife warden and more importantly, his assistant, Dr. Pabla, were both old friends and were very sympathetic to the fact that we could introduce good kind of tourism, a different kind of tourism, and we could preempt and plan for the future. So in 2008, we signed a memorandum with them, an MOU, where we said, the big challenge in Satpura, the reason it never got developed was that nobody could figure out how do you take your vehicles across the dam, because the park was the other side of the river. How do you do that? You couldn't park your private jeeps there. That's not allowed. It's a tiger reserve. So what we did was we said to them, we will donate jeeps to you. We will hire them from you just like anybody else does. The only advantage we have is that we have priority in booking. So if we need it, we will always get them first. And then whatever surplus is that, you can rent them out to other people. Secondly, we will develop 2 distinct areas inside the core area only for walking safaris. No other safaris are allowed over there. Elephant safari and walking safari. That's it. Exclusive areas for walking safari. The first time that you have that in any core area of a tiger reserve in India at the moment. And the only example of that. Thirdly, we said, you've got this fantastic resource, the Tawa River, the Sonbhadra and the Tawa. We'll put canoes down there. So you go quietly into the backwaters, into the inlets. You can come up to sandbanks for nesting birds, photograph and go away and no disturbance. So they have motorboats out there, but they're very disturbing. You can go and come right up to crocodiles, watch wildlife. I mean, so many times we've seen tigers, leopard, bears over there. So many times we've seen hunts, followed wild dogs hunting, followed leopards hunting. So it's absolutely fantastic way of doing it, and government accepted. And we came in. And so that's how the Satpura model of tourism grew. Unfortunately, the efforts of government to introduce zoning into the area to actually bring order to the kind of development, that did work. So all of this beautiful area that you're seeing has all become, just chaotic development over here. That's one of the saddest things that's happened. And that happened due to political pressure, unfortunately, and, we couldn't do it. This is Lagda in the Sonbhadra. I mean, what a park. If you haven't been, please go. It's absolutely gorgeous. And, do all of the things. We used to have something that we called a non-motor day, where you walked from the lodge to the entry to the park. You took canoes, got into the walking area. You only walked. In the morning, you walked one of the areas. You came back by canoe. You walked the other area. You came back by canoe and you walked back. And that day, the bar was free for you if you did that. So that was quite a good incentive. And funnily enough, Indians did that quite a lot. And the walking. So most of the time, of course, as you know, in walking safaris, you don't generally see very much. But when you do, it's fantastic. And what it does is it allows you to get into the nitty-gritty of the jungle. And not only did we have, very well-trained guides, and because we managed to do it in a properly structured way, we had proper guide training from day one. We had driver training from day one. And then we had great naturalists, people who could actually sit you down, tell you about termites, tell you about all the butterflies out there, tell you about dragonflies, about herpetofauna, plants. And then when you did see a leopard or wild dogs or tiger or whatever on foot, well, the excitement of that is at a different level altogether. For some people, it was almost too exciting. When we went over there were very few tigers. Again, although the prey base was pretty good, there were very few tigers. And again, that argued possible selective poaching of tigers. But because there were very few tigers, it was one of the best places to see sloth bears, wild dogs, and leopards. Sorry, I forgot to put a leopard slide in there. Tiger numbers were very few in those days. Despite this being a storied tiger area, Chudna, Bori, all of these are storied tiger areas, but here there was very few tigers. Tiger numbers are back in Satpura, I'm told. And the best thing that's happened is that there's been a very, very strong buffer zone tourism development out there. And the buffer zones have become so healthy that now they are territorial tigers in the buffer zone north of the Tawa River. So, you can go camping over there, you can go cycling over there, you can spend an entire 2 or 3 day camp.
Where are you?
Sorry?
I just reached outside the cafe on the Python trail.
Okay.
Sorry, there was some disturbance. I muted them.
Okay. Anytime you want me to stop, I can stop. You know, to say. So anyway, we
So-
built Foresight. This is Foresight Lodge, made out of mud, which was a great idea, except we didn't realize that termites get into mud quite a lot. So you know, we had a lot of this thing. But it was an absolutely fantastic park, and probably the top experience for me. So yeah, it's a bit of a wrench when we sold it. We then moved, you know, then there was at the same time as we were selling this place and Wild India Camps was sold, I got into partnership with another ex-DOSCO. Wild India Camps had two ex-DOSCOs, you know, as my partners, and got into with another ex-DOSCO, 4 years junior to me, called Rahul Sharma. And we'd been sort of, you know, I'd been sending snow leopard treks and expeditions since 2001 to Ladakh. You know, with Tiger Tops, had spent many summers there. And we started working with the Snow Leopard Conservancy, a guy called Richard Wangchuk, the very visionary director, founder director of the Snow Leopard Conservancy. And so we then, you know, decided we'd get back into the Trans-Himalayan region. And we took one of the homestays that the Snow Leopard Conservancy had developed in a valley called Ule. And we developed that into the first dedicated wildlife lodge of Ladakh, winter lodge for Ladakh, obviously focused on snow leopards. That was the charismatic species, but on all the sort of you know, Trans-Himalayan wildlife that was there. And the thing out here is that the Snow Leopard Conservancy had trained a cadre of fantastic trackers and spotters, of which the owner of this place, so we lease it from him. The owner of this place is one of the preeminent trackers and spotters of Ladakh, chap called Shawang Norbu. So this is our lodge. So what we did was we made proper structure. We had bathrooms, we had heat, we had light, comfort, good food. So, you know, you could go off and do all of those things and then come back to a warm, comfortable place and have, you know, proper loos and so on and so forth in the area. So it became, you know, it allowed snow leopard tourism. It made it more accessible for older people, for people who didn't want to sit in minus 25 degrees in a tent. And to be honest, I no longer want to do that myself. And this is the view from Ule. It's absolutely gorgeous area. And very often, many of our best sightings are right from the lodge itself, you know, just from the roof of the lodge. But tracking snow leopards is tracking snow leopards. I mean, you know, all that stuff, you know, gray ghost and everything. This is just outside the lodge, by the way. You can see that's the approach road to the lodge that you can see. Tracking is a very, very specialized business out here. That's Norbu. I mean, when he gets into that position, all these guys, they go completely still. It's like everything is focused through their binoculars and, you know, through the telescopes that they use. And very often you see this is all the group out there with their telescopes. And very often that's the kind of snow leopard sighting that you're going to see very far up, high on a ridge, through powerful telescopes. And those are two cubs, by the way. You know, again, seen very close to our lodge. But every now and again, you get lucky. And, you know, this is the kind of sightings that if you're lucky, you'll get. This is from a camera trap, by the way. But, you know, again, in the Ule Valley, this is just somebody walking. They got lucky. They saw this. This is from a camera trap. And just look at that. So that's the two cubs, three cubs over here. And that's what you see. And this is looking down from a place near a place called Spango. Of course, this is the prey base, you know, ibex, great populations of ibex. And the reason we go looking for them in the winter is because that's when the snows drive all of these herbivores down into the lower valleys. And so the snow leopards follow them down and follow the livestock as well. So that's your best chance of seeing snow leopards. There's a herd of ibex, and yeah, it's astonishing how they may eke out a living in this kind of a habitat. That's Uriel, Ovis Vignai, Shapu, Nayan, you know, all these different names. Wild sheep, beautiful wild sheep. And I'll tell you something. When we first started going over to Ladakh, when I first went there in 1978, very, very difficult to see this. Hunting was rampant. The army was trigger happy. Now they're all over the place, you know, including into the Indus Valley, very, very close to Leh. And, you know, if you've been to Leh recently, you know how crowded Leh is and how much traffic there is all over the place. I mean, when Alok Chandola was my boss, you know, he set up this place called the Ladakh Sarai, which was the first of the non-Leh hotels. You know, also a pioneering venture where Tiger Dsobs venture. Stoke had had wildlife. You'd occasionally see wolves and things, and Bharal. But now there's, in the winter, you'll see a herd of 50 or 50 Nayan, Shapu, they call it over there, just above Stoke Palace. So the wildlife has come back, and they're gorgeous animals. You see them in big herds, and Bharal, of course. So these are your three main wild prey species that both snow leopards and wolves. And then wolves eat a lot of this, is the woolly hair out there, and there's a good population of wolves as well. So our this is a fantastic, real sort of council rock moment. Lucky enough to see Himalayan fox as well. So our project over here was very much consciously a conservation-oriented project. We employ locally. We put a lot of money into the community in terms of royalties. We pay wildlife fees, of course, that is incidental. But voluntarily, what we do is we only employ locally. And it's very difficult. Ladakhis have too much money now. So it's very difficult to get Ladakhis to work. We put a huge amount of money into the local community via the trackers. We pay them anything between 5,000 and 3,000 rupees per day, per person. We are the biggest employer of taxis in the winter in Ladakh. We put in 300 rupees per guest per day into a fund that we've created with Rizong Gompa, which there's a bit of a problem with. They gave the wrong details to the bank manager, so it's frozen. But that is directly meant for work in the community. So that's what we're up to at the moment. If ever any of you want to go there, let us know. It's absolutely a fantastic spot. That was Lamagaya, by the way, bearded vulture. These are Tibetan partridges. Not in our area, but they come lower down, and in winter is the best time to see them. So that's me done, 50 minutes, and within the time. So yeah, so if you have any questions or want to chat about anything, happy to do that. Hello.
I can't believe it's 50 minutes.
Yeah, it's phenomenal
It
talk,
seemed
sir.
like it was like it went.
It seems like it was a lifetime.
Yeah.
About 30 minutes ago.
Yeah.
It finished so fast in 50 minutes.
Yeah, it was really. But I have to thankfully been lucky to do the Satpura, and of course I have not been to Snow Leopard Lodge, but I went with Surya and gang to Ladakh and had one of the best snow leopard sightings one could ever get. So I am looking forward to going to Snow Leopard Lodge for sure.
Oh, you must. And Mangtu, the new lodge is
I have seen photographs of that, and I think, we can safely say we are one of the top countries for snow leopard tourism in the world as well.
Easily.
Easily. What we
between
offer as
Spiti and us, easily.
Yeah. So if one of the ex-Doscos on the group actually contacted me privately a couple of weeks ago, and he went for a couple of days to Snow Leopard Lodge. Yeah, a guy called Vigyat, and
of course.
he didn't see snow leopard. I think the snow leopard came out the day after he left.
Yeah,
but he had a great time. He was putting photographs of the apricot blossom and all that. So yeah, I totally second that. If people want to see the beauty of Ladakh, and you trust me, you want to be comfortable when you're in -20, you definitely want to be in Snow Leopard Lodge. Yeah.
I have a quick question. They're trying to introduce cheetah to the Palampur Kuno wildscape as such. What are your views around that? Is it something that will happen, or you think will sustain? Or
cheetahs in the Kuno area.
Correct.
Okay. Look, should I have my video on to start video? Okay. This meeting. Okay, got it. All right. I don't know what. Anyway, so my own view, and having spent time in Kuno, is that it would be very interesting to know what they're doing to strengthen the actual physical protection, because to my mind, that is the biggest threat over there. Okay. Now, I'm no expert on cheetahs, so I can only assume that the people who they brought from Namibia and South Africa, and I've met some of the guys, they are incredible experts. They are real, authorities on what they do. So if they say it's worth doing, and remember, a lot of the money is being borne by companies like And Beyond and so on. So if they're going to put their money where their mouth is, then you can assume that in terms of the actual habitat, in terms of how they're planning to do it, it's probably a viable proposition. Okay. The people involved, by and large, on both sides, are serious people. They know what they're doing. So I would say, yeah, viable over there. But the question is, what the hell are we doing about lions? Why aren't lions coming? And it's not an either-or proposition. Lions and cheetahs coexist. They have coexisted in Gujarat, and there's no reason why they can't coexist in Kuno. But I mean, it seems utterly insane to me that we know that there's a pressing requirement for lions to find an alternative home. They are now inhabiting highly populated areas of Gujarat. And the fact that you're not being able to, within the same country, you're not being able to get an alternative population of lions into Kuno is insane. But you're being able to get cheetahs all the way from Africa. Just think about the insanity of that decision-making process. So I mean, if it's just a straight up thing of cheetahs coming, yeah, clearly it's viable. The people who know about these things, who have skin in the game, say it's viable. So I think fantastic idea. I'm not one of those who's always sort of carping and saying, why this, why that. Hey, listen, at some point with our kind of population and with our growth rates, which are inching back up to, will go back to about 8-9% eventually. I mean, you can imagine that all of these wilderness areas are going to become islands. The idea that we can have large landscape level conservation, maybe in a few areas, but by and large, I think linear projects are going to cut through all of these areas. So we've got to get used to the fact that we are going to have islands out here. We are going to have active management that's already started. In Madhya Pradesh, all parks, Noradehi, Ratapani, Satpura, your Sanjay National Park, they have constant transfer of animals. So, surplus population, surplus numbers of cheetah are being pushed into Sanjay National Park. It's just normal. There's no big deal. Okay, you just go over there. There's a truck park. There's a grass funnel made. 30 cheetah are pushed into these specially made trucks, very scientifically done. And they're driven off to this thing. Tigers are moved around like that. So we are already getting to a management space where we are managing the gene pool exchange through artificial means. Okay. So I see no reason why cheetahs can't come in. And I see no reason why, all these animals, they are going to be moved around. And we are also eventually going to have to get used to the idea of strictly fenced reserves. They may be very large reserves, but there will be extensive fencing as they do in parts of Africa. This is coming and this is happening.
Well, Hashim ji, what you showed us that the big five in MP are earning so much per square kilometer, and the smaller parks are not being able to earn that much. So won't that cause some kind of a disbalance, and eventually either the smaller parks will be mismanaged or they won't get the kind of facilities because of government funding? So how do you think we can address this problem?
Very good question, Adhiraj. And what I showed you was only one part of the full presentation, because I was just creating my argument for the participants in that particular forum, to say that, asking exactly the same question. I said, guys, this is crazy. This kind of skewed development is not healthy. And I'm just showing. Look at what the big five are doing, and look at all the other parks. They're getting nothing. And you're seeing that, comparing Kuno, you're seeing that there is less money being put in, even proportionately less money being put in for expenditure in that park. And so my point was that the reason why new development isn't happening is that government does not have a fixed policy on wildlife tourism, on the development of wildlife tourism. These are ad hoc policies that they make. There is no settled policy that every stakeholder within and outside of government, political, bureaucratic, and private, has signed up. So when you go into a park, like I told you, as far as Satpura was concerned, we went in over there, and it so happened that our opposite numbers in government were personal friends and also sympathetic and on the same wavelength as we were in the way tourism should be developed. So we went into Satpura, all right, and we had, and there was a positive environment for us to invest that money. Because remember, when you go into a brand new park to invest, your gestation period for returns is much greater. All right. So it's a real risk. And you're borrowing money. In those days, we were borrowing money at 12%. So, that's a very, very high cost of capital. We were putting our own money in and so on and so forth. And, you don't know. And then, there's all of these things. Will we get money? Will we get return? And on top of that, there's the uncertainty. Today we have this, we are marketing walking, we are marketing canoeing, ye wo kar rahe hain. Tomorrow a new director will come and, will he change this policy? And it did happen. Will a new chief wildlife warden come who says, tourism is crap, we should get rid of all tourism?
Hashim.
So, yeah, I just finished that, Alok. So just to Adhiraj's thing, just to answer Adhiraj. So my point over here, Adhiraj, in that forum was, government has to create the ecosystem which allows an enabling ecosystem to allow private entrepreneurs the comfort to go and develop these places. Without that, your comments are absolutely correct. Sorry, Alok.
Yeah, Hashim, what I was saying is that I think there are certain things that need to be redefined in terms of tourism policy and stuff like that. It's not just tourism. I think it's the whole visitor scenario in protected areas that needs to be redefined. A visitor needs to be redefined. I mean, it cannot be local Thanewar going there to brush his teeth in the morning. That kind of stuff. So
Sure.
I think a policy has to be a visitor policy for all visitors, including employees of the government, including the forest department staff, including the wildlife watchers and wardens and everyone else. I think unless they're included in the pressure that's brought upon the park, I think we're getting it wrong. And I guess you have familiarity with the situation and the issues. And I guess I would suggest that you, when you discuss these things with the chaps in authority and in positions of taking decisions, you will try and point this out.
No, very good point, Alok. Absolutely right. You couldn't have said it better. All of these, we look at these numbers and we put aside. You're absolutely right. Everybody should be included.
Yeah, I was on the WCPA task force for tourism, and those days, one had to hobnob with the bureaucrats and the ministers and all that to be heard, which one was unable to do. But this was something we're discussing right at international levels at the IUCN, that visitor policy should be decided and everyone should be included as a visitor, including the tourists. Tourists is just a fraction of it.
Sure, absolutely. This should form part of the policy. But interestingly, there have been some very, very interesting draft proposals that have gone up to government, which are actually aligned with the law, with the Wildlife Protection Act. You may have heard now that under the Forest Conservation Act, tourism until now had been defined as a non-forest activity. It has now been accepted as a forest activity. So in theory, you could actually even have conservancies over there. And what you're talking about, visitor numbers, absolutely it should, you make a very, very sound point there. But whatever it is, at the moment, we don't even actually have a coherent, comprehensive ecotourism or wildlife tourism or conservation tourism policy, either at state level or at national level. It's all pretty ad hoc, and it's not properly thought through, and they are all part of general tourism thinking. So there's no specific thinking. And then when you look at the numbers and you look at the potential over here, and you look at the potential to use this revenue to make conservation palatable and acceptable to local communities, which is where the future of our conservation lies. I mean, it's just crazy, you know. I mean, and it's, yeah, it's sometimes you just, you know, just bang your head against a brick wall and you think, I mean, is anything ever going to change? Because the other big problem that we all know with the bureaucrats is that as soon as you may have one good guy who's actually, you know, doesn't have bureaucratic wax in their ears, and so they're actually listening. And then the next thing you know, just as they're coming up to speed and you're beginning to understand their point of view and vice versa, they're gone. So it's, yeah. So you've been through the mill, Alok, so you know what it's like. So yeah.
Well, nice to see your pretty face, Hashim. And keep going. Keep at it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hashim, Kunal here. Hi.
Hi, Kunal.
Just to add to what you guys, Alok, and you were saying, I remember in 1983 talking a lot, dealing a lot with Mr. Pawar, H.S. Pawar at that time. And one of the things which was really talked about at that time was the core, buffer, and multiple use area functionality of Project Tiger. And at that time, I think they had pushed multiple use as, okay, first let's concentrate on core and buffer, etc. And eventually the success and failure of Project Tiger will depend, not just Project Tiger, conservation as a whole in India will depend on the management of multiple use areas. Is multiple use areas still being talked about, or has it just kind of died out completely?
Oh, no, Kunal, it's, I mean, my God, you know, I've been resurrecting ghosts from the past. Yeah, I haven't heard that term for 25 years, I don't think. So okay, I mean, we've got to redefine it. So the terminology has changed a little bit. So what they call multi-use zones is now, you know, all the around a protected area, and depending on, you know, the status of the protected area, the multi-use areas have become the sort of the PF, you know, what was the old protected forest, the commons of the village, you know, where all the Nistar is done. But but it's also the way the law is being reframed and, you know, redrafted. And, you know, the Wildlife Protection Act, for instance, says that, you know, the moment you know, not even the final Gazette notification, the sort of, you know, the first Gazette sort of notification of a wildlife sanctuary is done, then all the rights of the local people are frozen. Whereas, you know, the old law said that, you know, the rights have to first be settled. So which is what this is what it's all been about. That, you know, when you say multi-use is basically the rights of access to resources that local people have. So this is an area of great, and, you know, and that's what's given space to the Forest Rights Act of 2006. You know, that's what's brought it in because of the kind of smoldering resentment that tribal communities particularly have to being shut out of the resource zone, or what you call the multi-use areas. So again, that's a very important point you bring up over here. And, you know, I mean, one of the interesting sort of ideas that is coming up out of FRA is that why can't we mobilize communities which have rights of ownership of forest? So why don't we preempt them from burning and cutting and selling off the sand? We can do that and say, you know what, we can make conservancies for you, long-term tourism conservancies on the African model, or an adaptation of that model, in which case you not only preserve your forests and the resources, but you also get a steady stream of income via royalties and employment. So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff, Fauji, that is coming up. Another interesting thing is, you know, we talk about conservation tourism. And one of the things I didn't mention is that conservation tourism is in two parts. One is consumptive and non-consumptive. So we only talk about non-consumptive tourism. Why have we shut out the option for consumptive, for hunting? You know, we are hunting large amounts of animals. We're killing nilgai, we're killing wild boar. Punjab is the only state which allows consumption of wild boar that is shot in your fields. All of the places say, how stupid. In a country that is massively protein deficient, we are allowed to kill, but under all kinds of stupid rules. But even if you do manage to kill legally in your field, you're not allowed to eat it. I mean, how stupid is that? Why can't we have trophy hunting? You know, because the money that Pakistan sold 5 markhor for $2 million last year or year before. And all that money, 40, 50, 60% of that money, I forget the formula, goes into the local communities. So markhor numbers have shot up in Pakistan, you know, which is one of the most destructive countries for wildlife. So there's a whole lot of stuff that is available to us. We're just not using it. And we're stuck with this damn socialist mentality and bureaucratic, and it's both within government and outside of government. It's not just within government.
Hashim, can I just intervene for a minute?
Hi, Ashish. By the way,
Couple-
I hope you like that photograph of yours. Huh? I brought it in just for you.
yeah, but you looking for more.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, I mean, let's not talk about it. 2 points here. One, there's a distinction between those chulas here, you know,
Yeah.
you mentioned. Yes, the smokeless chulas don't work.
But they work very well, but they don't work to the purpose that the people want, the way the people want them.
You know, biomass, the best optimum consumption of biomass, you know, they don't really perform that. They do better than the old ones, I mean, the traditional ones. But
Correct.
they don't really offer the optimum. The optimum is, you know, these rocket stoves, etc., which are
Oh, absolutely.
actually not that expensive. And I really think, you know, I do believe in biomass because, you know, it can be it's something that is
It should be used. It's the best fuel.
and it's so easy to replenish, and
Exactly.
it doesn't cause any destruction. You know?
Absolutely. I think this purest kind of thing. But you're absolutely right about that rocket stove, Ashish. So there's a guy not far from my house, a guy called Srinivas Rachakonda, who's become a very close friend. And he is, in fact, at this moment, experimenting with that for his local.
Yeah, but there's plenty around here, so no need inventing the wheel. I'll send you whatever I've got. You know,
No, but
second thing that I totally agree with you is, you know, government needs to, I mean, and we've been saying this for decades that, you know, tourism is here to stay. Whether it's wildlife, whether whatever it is here to stay. And unless government does something about and, you know, listens to people like us and, you know, formulates a policy, you're going to have a mess everywhere. There's plenty of mess, as you know, around where we are, around, you know, we just returned from the hills, and, you know, if you can influence the government, you know, please do that. And it's fantastic. What you're doing in Ladakh is absolutely wonderful. Right, wonderful to see you.
Yeah, thanks. Good to have you on board. Yeah.
One of the questions that I wanted to ask, Hashim, is that which we used to discuss when we were in bench as to why the forest department used to keep closing roads because it never made sense.
Yeah.
And since that law has come in from that PIL that was fired, tourism has grown 200%.
Yeah.
And the area that tourism can cover has gone to 20%.
Yeah.
And that has been a disaster for tourism per se, because everyone now can easily bitch about tourism as in every way, because they can always say, oh, you know, you just create crowds, you create a mess, because you're not given any leeway. Okay, you know, there's so much area that is available and forest rest houses that can be used, and instead you would encourage hotel culture more. So, I mean, I don't know if the policy should involve this particularly, especially in tourism, that we need to open up more areas because we are overpopulating by compressing, by creating bottlenecks.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, nobody has been able to answer the simple question, on what scientific basis did they arrive at that number of 20% of core area to be opened? There's absolutely no basis for it. It was just a number they pulled out of a hat. What's the basis? If you look at the guidelines, at the tourism guidelines, that, you know, the whole argument was that NTCA hadn't published the guidelines, you know, which was required by the Wildlife Protection Act. All right. So they came out with guidelines. Even the guideline says there should be a carrying capacity. of number of vehicles. On what basis did the present carrying capacity get worked out? The mathematics has been shown to be totally flawed with assumptions which simply will not stand scrutiny. Why do you close certain roads? I mean, on what basis has that 20% been identified? Look at the distorted, I mean, you know, on the one hand, we talk about the distorted development of tourism in terms of protected areas. But even worse is if you look at the distorted development of tourism around the parks. So all the benefits of, say, you know, Bandhavgarh being a classic example, Sawai Madhopur, you take any of these parks. The main gate, the main entrance to these parks is where all the benefits of tourism have flowed. And that has distorted also the development of those areas. So it's not just people crowding into 20% of the area. So there's a carrying capacity. Okay, they say every zone has X number of vehicles in the morning, X number of vehicles in the evening. Fair enough. But then what's happening outside? Actually the biggest problem and distortion is outside. You're not zoning. The politicians are refusing to allow. I mean, look at the number of Benami properties that are owned by politicians and bureaucrats in all of these parts. Everything is being done around a certain area. So around Tala and Bandhavgarh, your land price could be anything between 20 and 30 lakhs an acre around that area. And you go off to the edge of Bandhavgarh, 30 kilometers away to the other side in the non-tourism zone of the buffer area, and you'll get it for 1.5 to 2 lakhs, maybe even less than that. No employment over there. Look at Tala today is a humming little town. You can build a house, you can equip it, you can have all the trimmings in your house, and there are shops in Tala which will do it for you. But you go 30 kilometers away, nothing. So, this is precisely what I'm talking about, Sabir. There is no settled policy. There is no open and clear agreement that, hey, tourism is not just here to stay. Tourism, if handled properly, is the engine which will finance conservation. I mean, why? It's simple. Why is Madhya Pradesh Forest Department, the wildlife wing of Madhya Pradesh, why is it pushing this buffer zone tourism, which they call buffer mein safar? Because there are no limits. In the buffer, you can employ the entire buffer zone for tourism. You just have to alter the management plan, which you can do with no reference to NTCA. Okay, because that is the area where they can actually develop. And, today, buffer zone tourism, one of the reasons why you may all have seen that the conflict with tigers through central India, and even the sub-Himalayan landscape, and I guess even in the south, but particularly in central India, is increasing massively. And one of the reasons for that is in the last 8-9 years, cattle, because the cattle trade has collapsed. And so surplus cattle are being pushed into the villages, into the forests. So today, the buffer zones of Bandhavgarh and Kanha and Pech and all of these places are supporting a higher density of tigers than I have ever known. The source population that you used to see was the core area and the buffer zones and the adjoining forests, which we said was the sink. And then finally we said the sink is that all the surplus tigers went there to die. Well, now those tigers are living. So tourism is, tourism is being encouraged into those in those buffer zone areas. But we are not addressing the distortion of exactly what you're saying. This 20% has utterly distorted, and then they use precisely the same stick. Samir, what you're saying is absolutely right. So the anti-tourism lobby says, look, tourism is so distorted. There's only a few pockets around Kanha and Bandhavgarh which are developed, or Corbett which are developed, and look how badly developed they are. And this is the responsibility of the tourism industry. Government has no say in it. As far as they're concerned, government is blameless.
They'll always say, they just create a hangama, and there are so many crowds around tigers and all that. So because you don't have anywhere else to go.
But whose fault is it? I mean, it's like saying that the automobile manufacturers are responsible for the mayhem of Indian roads. No, the responsible group is the government. The government needs to create the legal framework and enforce the laws. So there's huge number of problems. One sec. Yusuf, मैं बाद में बात करूँगा. क्या हुआ? हाँ, 4 बजे Yusuf, 4 बजे कल. Sorry, I have an early morning flight to catch. Yeah, so we can go on the whole evening about this, but yeah, basically no settled policy, complete distortion and muddle thinking, completely muddle thinking.
Because I mean, I've had this argument with the forest officers that one can prove it, that if you open all the roads in the forest, most of the people who enter your forest will only use the most convenient route that is there for their quickest safari and get back out. That's it. The rest of the roads which are available will be used by the wildlifers who are actually interested in going and exploring something which is more exclusive.
Well, not only that, I mean, nobody's saying that you increase the numbers. You keep the carrying capacity the same, right? You just increase, but you just open up the entire area. So you're actually reducing the density of tourism inside the park. And then what are you doing about addressing the issues outside? I mean, look at Corbett, with all that development between the edge of Corbett and the Kosi. I mean, that's a scandal. Whose fault is that? That's government's fault, isn't it?
Because it's so badly planned. The corridor of the animal movement is really hammered.
Yeah. So I mean, we can go on and on about lack of, but it all stems the
lack of policy.
Yeah, it goes back to lack of settled policy.
Hope at some point there is someone more friendly for that period of time where a policy can be settled and it can be set in stone, at least for a while before the person is transferred.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that you can ever hope for. In this case, tenure is long enough for things to go on.
Tenure is long enough.
I think Dalip has a question here. Sorry.
Political will. Yeah, sorry.
Hi, Hashim. Thanks so much for that. Since Corbett was raised, I completely agree with the assessment and what's been happening over here on the Kosi. Any suggestions on how one can actually get the administration to look at it in another way and sort of push them for the zoning that is so, required for the other landscapes that exist apart from the Kosi corridor that they've managed to really screw up?
I just don't understand how you can, how to do it. I mean, so I'll tell you as far as the zoning. So we talked about the zoning, right? If I get your question right, about zoning outside the parks.
Yes, correct.
So I'll tell you the experience that we had with Satpura, and that might shed some light on this. So as part of the whole sort of Satpura model, one of the things was that they would be zoned, and that the parks would follow. We were actually ahead of the curve as far as the guidelines are concerned, and that each lodge that would be allowed to come in and that would be licensed and given the NOC would have to fulfill certain requirements: distance from the park, how much land that they had, total built footprint on that land as a percentage of your total holdings, etc. So, for instance, at four sites we had 44 acres, and we built only 4 acres. I mean, I'm saying 4 acres as a compact area, and it was all within that 4 areas. That was our total. The rest was just wilderness. And so, that was all part of what the guidelines also stated. The other thing that they said was that they're going to bring in, because also what is the legal framework within which you can bring in zoning? So, if you don't want to get in and change big acts and so on, there is an act in Madhya Pradesh, which I think is available everywhere else. It's called the Town and Country Planning. Now, under Town and Country Planning, you can actually zone. You're allowed to zone. So the Chief Secretary of Madhya Pradesh told me in 2012, he says, don't worry, because, we raised this issue. And he said, don't worry, we are going to impose Town and Country Planning. And within that, all future development is going to be as part of an overall comprehensive, coherent building plan. So it's fantastic. When we came back, when we approached him in October, we discovered nothing of the sort. People were coming up, mushrooming all over the place. So despite the fact that a legal vehicle was available for them to do it, when they tried to impose it, the local political bigwigs who also were investing in this area went to the chief minister and said, what the hell are you doing? You're allowing these outsiders. Now, I'm from Madhya Pradesh. Well, I'm not from Madhya Pradesh, but I'm settled in Madhya Pradesh. My property is there. My voter ID is from there, but I'm still an outsider because I'm not from the immediate village over there. They said, what the hell? you're stopping us from building in our area. You're not allowing this, you're not allowing that. And why should? So the chief minister called the principal secretary in forests. He said, sir, please stop all of this. You're going to lose my election. And went on. So this is the situation. The legal vehicle is available, but can we get the political will and the bureaucracy to be able to enforce it or to bring it into play? That's the challenge. And I think that's, so it's there. It's just that can we get the government, can we get the authorities to actually adopt it? Does that help?
I'm living in Kulu right now, and I'm seeing a lot of destruction all around every so-called development. In fact, the Bhutan model is often talked about. When we're looking at development in India and how haphazard the whole thing has been. I'm not sure.
Fauji, is that you? Okay.
Yeah. So basically, the point is, I think eventually, do we need to go for a Bhutan model for wildlife tourism as such? Because really going for that, you referred to Imran Khan's, Pakistan's Markhor policy, for example.
Yeah.
To go in for high-end tourism, then, how else do you do it? Because it's already become, I think, almost in many areas, like which are the developed areas, it's already gone beyond the point of no return. Yeah.
Absolutely. See, the thing is this, that we still have in many of our areas, astonishingly, we still have some great parks and reserves available to us. All right. I do not think that in India we can actually adopt a Bhutan, strictly a Bhutan model. We can adopt the Bhutan model in certain areas, like Ladakh needs it, Sikkim needs it.
Certain areas. Obviously, you can't do it.
Uttarakhand needs it, Himachal needs it. Okay, so certain areas. Yeah. But if you actually take a broader perspective and you look at conservation tourism, the development of conservation tourism across India, well, you don't actually have to go only for an exclusive high-end model. We have enough space here to address the entire spectrum of tourism demand and do it well. It just requires imagination. So let me give you very quickly one model. The most expensive bits, you don't give them anywhere in the parks. You say, okay, this area of buffer zone or this area of territorial forest over here, which may be a connecting area, which has high conservation value, you take it over as a conservancy with the community. We will hand over the ownership of that under FRA to the communities involved, say 3 different communities involved. We'll hand over this thing. You then have to come up with an agreement with those communities about how you're going to develop a conservancy-based high-end tourism model. Okay, I think the logic is pretty simple over there. So you work out, royalty sharing, staff training, staff employment, etc., and a management program, and you come up with a thing, and that will cost people, $1,000 a night per person to go in, just like in Africa you do. On the other hand, you go into the edge of a buffer zone, well away. Again, say for instance, you are in Pench. You go towards the Gangita, one of the other gates of the park, which have now been closed. You go in over there. Huh?
And Gumtara and Jamtara.
Gumtara, not Jamtara, but Gumtara. You go over there, you say, okay, no other tourism is going to come over. You zone it. You say this area is going to be for education, for school kids, for young families, and the pricing of this area and the entry into this particular area is going to be set at a particular level. You don't have to have it at 4,000 rupees or 2,400 rupees per jeep as you do now in Bandhavgarh. You can have a nominal thing of, say, 150 rupees entry fee over there, or 100 rupee entry fee over there. But there you say that it's going to be a particular type of tourism. There is nothing that actually prevents you from doing it. All you need to do, and it's acceptable within the law, is to adopt a licensing system. And you set the conditions of the license. We had given them a comprehensive program, Kunal, back in 1989 to do all of this. So the means, the tools, the levers are available to us. The law allows a lot of these things. It's just that, do we have the imagination to do it as an industry? More importantly, who in government is willing to engage with us and talk about these things? Because it's going to take a lot of hard work, to change rules and regulations, maybe tweak the law a bit here, tweak the law a bit over there, to make local staff receptive. But something has to change. It can't go on like this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hashim. You've given us a lot to think about. Hopefully, we continue this conversation offline at some point as well. Thanks.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Yeah, I think we.
Hashim, that was a wonderful talk. I'm going to
you
give you
can,
my feedback in detail. It was an eye-opener, and I didn't realize the amount of fantastic work that you've done. All your figures and your comparisons and your detailed in-depth study, your walking trails and the canoe rides without the use of vehicles. I think all that has been so fantastic for me to hear. Your Snow Leopard Lodge, the experiences in that. It's been trailblazing for me as an experience hearing you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for letting me come onto the forum.
Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you, sir. Look forward to hearing from you again
Yeah,
in the near
absolutely.
future.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank
All
you
the
very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Hashim.
Bye. Bye, guys.
You, Ash.
Thank
You,
you.
Ash.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.